that only 27% of companies are compliant with GDPR. These are companies that are supposed to be compliant. This was from a survey of about 1,200 companies. And what it said was that only 27% are compliant, which is only 3% over last year, which was a big deal because that's when it all took effect. Now, what are the challenges? And this was the important part. For 44% of the non-compliant ones, the right to access rule, the right to access, that part of the rule, is a challenge. Okay, and here's the challenge. In large databases, well, in our database, there are some 1,000 fields. Okay, and some of them go back to the 2009 census. So the first point is, and it's based on neighborhood you live in. Okay, so let's say there's 1,000 variables in the customer database, and they want to know everything that we know about them, or that we think we know, which because that's the joke of it all. That would be something 40 to 60 pages plus. You got to have a key with it to explain each one. There'd have to be a definition of each field, and most of them are not. Most of them are, to me, are self-explanatory when I use them. Like median dwelling value, but there's all kind. If you sent them to the Census Bureau or something, you could easily be sending them 100 pages of stuff that no one could decipher. So if that's one end of the spectrum, what's the rest of it? Do I tell them what the average credit score in their neighborhood is when it isn't specific to them? It's a good question. I don't know the answer. There isn't really a simple answer, and that's part of the problem with government regulation. It throws out the concept and then doesn't. It's just not practical. It's not practical for the consumer. It's not hard to dump this stuff out or send them a PDF or something. That's easy. The difficult part is, it's not that easy because it's so big. It won't fit in most email boxes. Okay. The next one is consent management. That one's a challenge. That one's an even bigger challenge because, okay, so in the normal world, when someone sends us a note saying or calls up one of our clients and says we don't want to be mailed again, or like my unsubscribes on my own email list, I make a note, move their email into an unsubscribe file. It's just a text file. And then whenever I do a broadcast email, which it is rare, if you'd like to get in on those, send me a note, john@wdma.org. But it's very, very rare that I send them out. Once a month, I kind of try and average, but it's more like once every 3 months or something. I still get unsubscribes, which is ridiculous. And they'll normally say, well, I'm trying to keep the total volume of email down. It's not going to, my unsubscribing to me is not going to affect it, but you may miss an idea that can break through your business and explode your growth. Keep that in mind. Anyway, so I get a lot of nice notes. I send out about 4,000 and I get back, 6. And it's usually somebody that was spamming me on LinkedIn, which is kind of funny. Anyway, so consent management. So I keep them. I keep a record of people who've written and unsubscribed. I keep a couple records. Now, what happens in the real world with GDPR? What they want you to do is get rid of their data. If they ask to be removed from your file, they should be removed from your file. Here's the problem with that. The problem with that is they're not just being removed from your file does not mean they're removed from all life on Earth. If they buy from a competitor or if they buy from a title that you're used to renting, and yes, even in Great Britain, the list industry is still alive, barely, but no, it's coming back anyway. And so if I'm Land's End and I mailed you a catalog for years, and you say no, I want to be removed. Let's just say CCPA takes effect, and you say I want to be removed. If we remove you, here's the puzzle. If we remove you, then how do we prevent ourselves from mailing you again if you buy from, say, Cabela's, who's willing to rent to us? I'm just saying, I don't know. I don't know that Land's End rents Cabela's. And I don't know that Cabela's would rent to Land's End, but let's just say. So you buy from Cabela's, and we rent Cabela's list, and now we mail you again. And now you're under the impression that you can sue us because we've invaded your home with a catalog. Heaven help us. As the Supreme Court ruled, the distance from the mailbox to the trash can is sufficiently short to not constitute an invasion of privacy. But this is the challenge that we face. What we really need to do is we need to save a copy, at least move them into an unsubscribe or something, and say, don't ever mail these and suppress them. That would make more sense than removing them from the file, and that's probably what we'll do, even though it may technically be more of a violation than it would be to mail them, to completely remove them, and then by happenstance mail them again. Because in some way, they got mailed in the first place. You know, it's a very big puzzle. And what if someone writes and asks for a catalog who previously said they didn't want any? Well, that's another problem. Okay, so challenges. Okay, Kroger announced that they're going to be using self-driving vehicles for some deliveries in Houston. And this is where they're headed, and I think this is really a kind of a cool idea. These things just mosey along. Nuro, that's called Nuro. Nuro, see that? And they mosey along at like 20 miles an hour or something. And I think they can be programmed to only basically use back roads, like, you know, in a city, use, you know, stop at stop signs and go methodically plod along and get to your house, rather than trying to run at freeway speeds or at, you know, 50 miles an hour. And they mosey on through the neighborhood at a very low speed and are very careful about what is in front of them and come to a stop and are not carrying people. So they're not likely to bump into a person, and they're not likely to, if they did, you could pretty much step out of the way, and they're not carrying people. So if they went off a cliff, it wouldn't be the end of the world. The can of beans might still be intact. Anyway, so I just wanted to let you know this is kind of where delivery is going, and of course it's going to impact things like Amazon Prime, which are right now organized around big warehouses. This gets it down to the last mile very, very nicely. So keep that in mind. A new study came out on the future of print, and it was produced by UPM Communication Papers. So it was a paper company, and I think it's a great trend that the paper companies are, you know, defending themselves in a sense. And ironically, we have a paper shortage again, which we have every time the economy kind of gets booming, because, you know, the hard part is paper plants are a city block long, and they're hard to you don't just whip one up, okay? And apparently there's been a lot of legislation in Europe and the strong dollar. So it's hard to get them from Europe right now. And so we're turning to our own sources of paper domestically. But the surprise is print continues to thrive, which I've been saying since 1995 with the onset of the internet. I argued from a philosophical perspective that, guess what? The human being is tactile. Your brain has 10 times the neural receptors of touch than it does to sight. But you can do better sight on a good catalog or a good magazine. You know, wonderful. I love wonderful magazines. Anyway, so the question is not print versus digital. And this is, I think, the main point I want to make. The question is not print versus digital. You know, and I always grab these. I have to keep these stack of PayPal and Google, and I've got LinkedIn and a bunch of others that are mailing me that are pure .com plays. The question is not print or digital. The question is how to use print in digital, because the primarily print media says 60 to 80% of their revenues are generated from print. Okay, the top 25 print magazines reach more adults and teens than the top 25 prime time TV shows. You know, and we're not doing print versus digital. We're not doing print versus TV. But the point is, people still like print. And my mailbox is much more empty than it ever was. And In the golden age of catalogs, we considered it before the internet, right before the internet, the late 80s, early 90s. In that golden age, only half the households in America bought from a distant vendor. Now it's almost 100%. So the viability of direct mail marketing is better now than in its heyday. Plus, some .coms are getting into the publishing business, print publishing business, launching digital brands, and the .coms are getting into the catalog business as well. Well, that's enough for today. I'm John Miglosh. Subscribe over on Periscope. Go to Periscope, John Miglosh, and download the app and subscribe, and you'll know as soon as the show starts every day, and you can join us and comment live. Have a great day. Bye-bye.